And here we go, guys. So I've gotten a lot of my squares put together. I set it all out. So as you can see, I've got a few of these out here. So this is what you want to do when you have all of your squares done and you've got your border on. You're now going to set your squares out in whatever fashion you choose. So I deviated a little bit. I think I originally had like all of the solid pink squares closer to the inside. But of course, as always, you know, you can change your mind how you like things. Maybe once you see the layout, it doesn't quite seem the way you thought it was going to be. So I've already gone ahead and seamed a few of these together already, so you can see how we're going about this. I am using the slip stitch method as opposed to the whip stitch. And it actually gives this great little raised texture. Now I've only done one row here. We're going horizontal, and I'm going to show you to do that right now. But I also want you to see kind of what we're going for here. So once you've got your squares all set up, you will then begin to slip stitch row by row. So I went horizontally first. You can go vertically first, doesn't matter. So I just took 2 rows. So I have 1 and 2. And what I did is I put them together and started slip stitching the seams. Then I moved to the next 2 blocks and the next 2 blocks, etc., so that I have the first 2 rows done. So you can see I have not done the vertical rows yet. So that's what I've done. So I've left the last 2 rows because I'm going to show you how to do that. And also what I did, just to add more texture to the idea of the patchwork motif, is you'll notice that some of my squares, so this is kind of right side up, we'll call it. So you can see that the stitches are right side up. I try to alternate. So this one, I don't know if you can see it very well. I'll go to here. This one, the stitches are running sideways. So I've kind of like changed the way all the squares look. So I've alternated upright and sideways, upright and sideways, upright, sideways. So they're all kind of always alternating how the stitches are facing. So not only do the color changes give that really cool patchwork effect, but so does the flow of where the stitches sit. And I think now you can really see where it's coming out and creating lots of nice definition. Love it. Okay, so let's get started on the slip stitch method of joining our squares. Okay, so I think I've mentioned several times how excited I am to work on this project because I am using through my scrap yarn, which I'm super excited. And I'm super excited because when I run out of yarn, it means I can buy more. Now, just one thing, because I'm sure somebody's going to ask me. I did not block these before I started seaming them together. It is completely up to you. Some people prefer to block all of their squares beforehand and then seam them together. I've done them both ways, and I find that, things will shift and change once you start seaming your blocks together anyway. So I usually will seam up my motifs together first and then block the whole project at the end. For me, that's easier. Some people find it easier to block individuals. Totally up to you. Both ways work. Okay, so first and foremost, you want to take the squares you're going to put together. So if you're starting with your first 2 rows like this, now this for me is my last 2 rows, but I left it separately to show you kind of how to get started. You want to make sure that all of your blocks are facing the same way. So for me, my right side is the side that's facing upward. So I just want to make sure none of my squares are facing down. Like, see that one? That is actually the back side of this square. So I just want to make sure that it's facing up, and it is all in the order that I wanted it to be. First of all, color-wise, and the way the stitches are laying. So this is a straight up, this is a sideways stitch, okay? And you'll know what's the front because whatever side you did your single crochet border on, the V's tend to come a little bit more pushed to the front. When I turn that over, See, you don't see the V's as much anymore. So that's how you can tell that's the back of your work. Okay, so I've got them laid out. I've got my order. Now, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start from my right and work to my left, okay? So let me just tilt this up a little bit so you can see. So what you want to do is I'm going to take my first 2 squares. I just leave that like that so I don't get confused. I'm going to take my first 2 squares and I'm just going to bring them up together like this. So what happens is the wrong sides are now facing each other, okay? And now we're going to take our yarn. Now, again, exciting news. I ran out of that, that beautiful, nice white yarn that I was using. I actually used it right up, so I'm very happy about that. And I did have some other type of white yarn, and this is, just if you're curious, Peyton's Canadiana, another yarn I actually adore working with. It is slightly thinner, even though it's considered a medium 4. But the cool thing is I'm just using this up to seam my squares, so it won't affect kind of how the whole project will look, okay? So that's what we're going to use. So I know I'm jumping around all over the place here. I'm very excited because we're getting close to finishing this. So you're going to place a slip knot onto your hook, okay? And now with the right sides facing out, the wrong sides are facing together, I am going to start with the first chain stitch just before I hit my official single crochet. So remember we did those chain 2s in the corner? So this would be 1 chain and this would be the second one. We want to start with this second one or the first one that's next to our single crochet. So what I'm going to do, sorry guys, I'm having an issue with my focus, so hopefully you can see this okay. I am going to insert my hook into that chain stitch, so be careful not to go into there because we really want to make sure that our corners are nice and even. Okay, so I'm going to go into that first chain stitch. Now, I want to do the same thing on this side. So it might be a little tricky to see from the back, so I'm just going to turn this over. And we'll notice that our stitches sit to the right here of the stitch. So that's the single crochet. This is the first chain we did coming out of it. So that's actually where we're going to go into. So I'm just going to now insert my hook there. And now we're in. So we've got the slip knot on our hook. We've got the front square and the back square right in the corner. And what we're going to do now, I'm just going to leave that short tail out there, is you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And that is our first slip stitch. So you're going to pull it through all of them. And that last one sometimes is a bit tricky when we first get started. Might be a little snug. There we go. So we've done our first slip stitch and now our work is joined together. Now, as you continue on, we'll actually have stitches to work into. What you're going to do is you're going to place your hook. So now we're going to go into our first stitch, but we're not going to go into the whole stitch, okay? We're going to go into the back loop of the panel that's in front. When we go into the back panel, we're going to go into the front loop. So again, I just make sure that one's already been worked into. Now this is the front loop because it's the one closest to me, okay? But if I turn my work here, you can see that's the back loop. So both panels are being worked into the back loop of their stitches. So again, I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of them. Okay, so we're going to do that again into the next stitch. Back loop of the next, and then I find the matching stitch across the way, and I go into the front loop. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Okay, so now I've only done a few, but you can see that now these are attached together. So I'm going to do that all the way down to the end. I'm going to do maybe a couple more with you. So I'm going to go into the back loop of my first panel and the front loop of my next panel. Yarn over, pull through all 3. And one more time, I'm going to go into the very next stitch, right there, back loop, and front loop of the corresponding stitch, and pull through. Okay, and I'm just going to pull that up just to kind of show you. So when we open this up like this, you can see that they're nicely attached there. And it has just a little bit of a ridge, which is kind of what I wanted for this baby blanket. It kind of gives it that quilted feeling and the quilted look. So when you lay it down, it should sit nicely there. Okay, so now I'm going to let you go so that you can finish this first square. And once you get to your last regular stitch, I'm going to meet back up with you here. We're going to talk about how we're going to go into the corner and then introduce our next 2 sets of squares. Okay, so I've just finished seaming up or slip stitching up my 2 squares together. So my work looks like that. Love it. And now we're coming to the end of or the corner of our square. So we've just gone into the last stitch of our square. Now we're going to go into that chain 1, that first chain 1 in the corner, and then the chain 1 in the back there, just like that. And I like going right into that chain 1 as opposed to the space. I just feel it gives it a little bit more of a uniform look. Okay, so now we're officially at the very corner edge of our work. So it looks something like that. And now, because I didn't block it, it's just kind of curving a little bit. Don't panic if that happens to you, because remember, we're going to seam up, down, long ways as well. So here's where the fun part happens, is connecting the next square. And this is usually the first sets of rows. Once you have all your rows in and then you do it vertical, it gets a little easier. But now we have to go back to where we had left our other squares, and we want to pick up the next 2 squares in line. So I'm going to just do that. So what that does is it closes up the wrong sides facing each other. So I keep them together. And now I just want to make sure that I can find, now I still have my hook here, because we're going to continue to slip stitch and attach these 2 next to these 2. Okay. This is where the fun begins. So first of all, I want to take my front piece here, and I'm going to find that first, the first chain 1 next to the stitch. So it's right there in the front one. Now I want to go to the back stitch, or the back motif. Okay, and there's my first chain 1 right here. So I'm going to insert. And it's going to be flopping around, and it's going to feel really, really odd, but it's okay. Just hang in there. Okay, so now you're going to yarn over, and you're going to slip it through all 3. And guess what? Now 4 of your squares are attached to each other. See that? The thing is, just be careful you don't let this one start twisting around. So you want to try and leave it where it is as much as possible. I mean, it's not really going to move, but just in case. So now you just continue on as you were before, and you're going to insert your hook into the next stitch, the back loop, and then you're going to go into the front loop of the stitch. And you continue on slip stitching, business as usual. Back loop and front loop, yarn over and pull through. Guys, I really hope that you can see this okay. Leave me a comment if you can't. It looks okay to me, but as I'm filming it, it kind of goes in and out. It's driving me crazy. But sometimes it actually looks okay when it comes out, and sometimes I think it's okay and it's not. So let's continue on. So you're going to go on like this until you finish your first full row. Okay, So right to the end. And once you get to the end here, you just take your next two panels or squares and you attach it just the same way. Okay, so I've done a few here. So now you can see it's really starting to take shape, and you can see how when we were worried about that curving there, it's going to sit nicely. So once you're done here, you know what to do. You go to your next set, you take your next two, and exactly like that, you do the same and then introduce it. And you keep doing that back and forth until you have your 5 motifs. That's going to be your row 1 and your row 2 done. Now as you go into row 3, you don't need to take the next 2. So for example, if this was my row 3, I would just take the next one and now start here if that was the beginning of my next row, and just start one at a time. So now you've got something to work with, right? So for row 3, now you just take one at a time, and then you bring the next one and the next one, and then you do row 4 the same way, and row 5. It'll feel a little easier. It's just row 1 and 2 are the establishing rows, right? So they just take a little bit more concentration and patience. So in the meantime, go ahead and finish all of your horizontal rows first, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll talk about, I'll just do a quick little intro about the vertical. It's the exact same way, but I like to check in on you guys. So I'll see you back here shortly. All right, so here are our squares all sewn up horizontally. So now you can really see what your work is going to look like. So cute. Okay, so I've got the slip stitching going across horizontally. And now we're just going to go back and do all the horizontal lines. So now it should be a little bit easier. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn your work so that you can work your squares horizontally again. And you're just going to do the same thing you did before. So I'm just going to get you started. You should probably be very comfortable. So I'm just going to get you started. You should most likely be very comfortable with this at this point. As always, I'm going to start with a slip knot on my hook. And now it's all set in place for you. So it's much easier to pick up. So now all we have to do is just make sure that we always start in the proper corner. Again, I'm keeping my right side facing up so that all of the slip stitching will all be on the up side or the right side. So again, I'm going to start with my first row here, and I'm just going to find that first chain stitch, insert, and then find the first one closest to the single crochet, and we're in. And then you will continue on as you did before. Okay, so this part is pretty straightforward. Back loop here, front loop there. So now you're pretty much a pro at this slip stitch method. Okay, so keep doing that, and then I'm just going to meet you up when we hit our first join here, okay? Okay, so I'm just coming up to my last stitch here where I'm going to go in the back loops, and you can see I'm already coming across the slip stitching from the horizontal way I was doing it, which now has become vertical. Just going to nestle that in there. And I basically just continue on. So there's where the it was horizontal, now the vertical. I'm actually just going to slip in there and just slip stitch. So it just allows me to keep this particular line consistent, just like that. And then I continue on. I meet up again in that chain stitch. I meet up again here. And I continue on, business as usual. Back loops there. front loops here. And I'll do that again, so that way you can see the whole effect. Okay, so now you can see that you just stitched over it. So you've got the one stitch that runs, now it's running vertically. Then you've got the other stitch that runs just nicely over it horizontally. And see how the corners just stitch up nicely? Love it. And that's it. So you're off to the races. You know how to do your slip stitching now. And so now I'm going to finish doing all of my rows, slip stitching all the gaps. So I had done it vertically. Sorry, I had done it horizontally, but now it looks vertically. I know it sounds confusing. So I'm going to finish seaming up the rest of my rows. And then we are almost there, guys. You know what comes next? The border. All right, and here we go. Our patchwork blanket is now completed. All the pieces are anyway. So I just gave it a bit of blocking overnight and I let it set so that they're a little bit more even. And you see this great texture that these slip stitches create. So it just gives it that nice little bit of oomph, I guess you would call it, to the patches. So I'm really happy with how that came out. So now what we're going to do is we are going to tackle the border. And most specifically, I just want you guys to look at often these little dips here in the joins of your motifs. It's very common to have that happen, whether you're dealing with regular squares or granny squares. So we're just going to take you through doing a very basic border using double crochets, and just to kind of guide you through how to maneuver through these little grooves. And once you've got a nice little border on there, all of that is going to even out and you're going to have a completed blanket. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook. And I'm using this white color that I've got. I'm now officially done all my other colors. Very exciting. So I'm going to place a slip knot. And what I'm going to do, this is the right side facing up, and that's how you want to work on your border. I'm going to grab, for me, I'm going to start in the corner. So I'm going to grab the top right hand corner, and that's where we're going to begin. So I'm just going to bring my work up here. And so I'm going to find that first chain space there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch to join. Just like that. Okay. And so now what we want to do is we want to chain 3, because this will give us the height of a double crochet stitch. Now remember in the past we were chaining 2. Normally I will chain 3. So this is where we are going to in fact chain 3. So we're going to chain 3 and then we are going to double crochet one more time into the space here. So we're just going to insert our hook. And that's one double crochet. And now what we want to do is we're going to go into the next stitch. So this is going to be a nice, simple, easygoing border, just one double crochet into each stitch. I am going to do this row into the back loops only. So because we did a finishing round of our squares and single crochets, I kind of want to bring this texture to the front. Especially because it's a different color than the pink or any other block that we have there. So we're going to yarn over, and instead of going into the stitch itself, we want to go into the back loop, which is right there. Okay, so you're going to go into the back loop and you're going to resolve a double crochet as usual. And stuff like that is going to happen. So don't panic. If your loops will stretch a little bit, that's totally normal. Okay. And then we're going to yarn over and do the exact same thing. So I'm going to find the back loop, insert, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. You can already see that that front loop is being pushed to the front, which is going to create a really nice ribbed texture. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do is 1 double crochet into each back loop of each stitch all the way around. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few more here just so you can see the effect. Okay, so just like that. Now you can really see that that ribbing or that ridge is really coming forward. And that's it, that's all. So we're going to do that all the way around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to meet you back up when we hit our first full corner here, just to kind of go over what we're going to do in the corners. So remember back here we did a chain 3, a chain 3, and a double crochet. So a chain 3 will always represent the height of a double crochet, and then we have a second one. So basically it's a very similar formula to what we were doing in the corners previously. Okay, so we'll do the 2 double crochets, chain 2 and 2 double crochets. So in this corner we began it, so we only did half of that corner. If that's too much info and is confusing you, don't worry. Just work your double crochets, 1 into every stitch across this first side, and I'm going to meet you back up in that first corner and I'm going to take you through it. But before I meet you in the corner, I am going to meet you up in this first little dip here. See where these squares meet? This one's not too obvious, but sometimes you're going to get this little dip action happening. So I'm just going to meet you up here in a few minutes to discuss how to kind of smooth that out with your border. Okay, so I have one more stitch before I hit that actual join. So I'm just going to go into the back loop there, double crochet as usual. And basically I'm going to test this out. So I will always do the last 1 stitch into the last stitch, and then I always want to try and find the seam somewhere in the middle and do 1 stitch there and then continue on as I go. Now some people will do 2 stitches together from the previous and the next. It depends on the project. Sometimes that'll work nicely and it keeps everything nice and smooth. Sometimes that just creates a bunch. So in this case, I am going to stitch into the seam somewhere in the middle where these 2 squares join. Now the only issue with this is that this is where we slip stitched as opposed to whip stitched. So I'm actually just going to go in the side here. As you can see, there's a little spot there. So I'm going to go in the side there. And I'm going to start a double crochet, and then I'm going to finish it, just to kind of see where things sit. Now I'm going to go on the other side of the slip stitch, and I'm going to go here. So the beginning of the side would be in this stitch, but because there's a space there on the other side of the seam, I'm going to insert there. And this is where I experiment and look to see how I like it. Actually, that worked beautifully. So sometimes what happens when you do it like that, it actually creates too many stitches and it bunches. Now, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to do 1 more. I'm going to actually begin going into the first stitch of the next block here, into the back loops. And then I'll be able to see if these stitches are going to be bunched up or not. Actually, I think that's going to be okay. I'm going to do a couple more, and that will allow me to be able to gauge if these are going to be too many stitches or not, because we don't want our work to bunch up. We want it to sit nice and flat and uniform and smooth. Okay, let's take that out and see what we have here. Actually, that looks pretty good. So in this case, that came out quite nice. It's not, sometimes you get a real dip in there. So I'm really happy with this. That means that our slip stitching how we were counting our stitches. We were really bang on, and it worked quite nicely. So that is what we're going to do. Every time you come to the join of 2 squares, you want to go into the loop that's sitting right next to where you slip stitched. You do a regular double crochet, and then nuzzled right next to it on the other side, that's where you're going to do the next stitch. So in essence, you're going to do 2 stitches in the space, quote unquote, between the 2 squares. And then you will just pick up starting right at the top corner there, which is what fell nicely, and continue on as usual. Now, again, if it starts to bunch up, just set your work down, look at it. If it looks like it's getting all bunchy and crowded, then you know you've done too many stitches. Just kind of gauge it visually to see how you like it. But that looks like that's going to work. So as before, we're going to finish the whole side, and then I'm going to meet you up in this first full corner just to guide you through rounding that corner there. Okay, so I just finished doing my last stitch here. So now we're going to work our first full corner, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to place 2 double crochets into that corner space there. Okay, so you'll yarn over first, and you'll pull through 2 as you usually would resolve a double crochet. We're going to do that again. So there are 2 double crochets now stitched into that corner space. Okay, so that's, you can see it's already starting to bend us around the corner there. Then we're going to chain 2, very similarly to what we did in the other corners. The difference is we're using double crochet stitches. Now we're going to place 2 double crochets back again into that same space. So we have 1 and we have 2. Just like that. So now you can really see it's formed a nice corner, and our stitches are coming around there, and now we can continue on. Now, as always, I like to remind people, anytime you're coming out of a corner, you want to be careful here. See, this is a single crochet stitch here. It's very easy to just think you're going to go into this next stitch because this one's being hidden. It is not to be missed. I can't speak for some reason. It is not meant to be missed. So you have to make sure that you kind of push these stitches to the side. And so if I were working the regular stitch, my first one out of the corner would be here. But I'm working into the back loop, so I'm going to get that one right away. And this just ensures you maintain consistency and uniformity in your work. And that each side should have the equal same number of stitches. Okay, so now you can see, hopefully, that we just came around that corner nicely. It just creates a nice bend, and it's very smooth. And I'm really happy with how this is coming. So just a nice, simple double crochet border. Now I am definitely going to do 2 rounds. So I'm going to go all the way around. And when I come back to the beginning, remember we did only half of a corner here. Once I get back to this first corner space, I'm going to make sure that I put 2 double crochets into that space, chain 2 before I slip stitch into the corner to close off that round. And if 1 round is good enough for you and you're happy with that, then you are good to go. I will most likely do at least a 2nd round. So once I slip stitch in the corner, I'm going to chain 3 and then begin the process again. But actually, once I've done 1 round, I'm going to take you through the join at the end and taking you on to round 2 for those of you that wish to do that. But in the meantime, you've got lots to do with doing 1 double crochet into each back loop of all of your stitches all the way around, and you'll have this beautiful, lovely border. Okay, so I have done 1 round of my border, and I'm really happy with how it's coming out. So I'm just coming back up to that initial corner, and I just wanted to go through that with you guys just real quick so there was no confusion. Remember when we started that we started only with the 2 double crochets in that corner space. And remember, the chain 3 counts as 1. Now we've come back to that same corner space. Now we're going to finish that corner. So remember, each corner gets 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. So we're just going to do the other part of that corner. So we're just going to yarn over and back into that corner space. We're going to place 1 and 2 double crochets. And then you're going to chain 2. And now you want to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3. So this is what's going to close off our corner. So the top of my chain 3 is right about there. Yeah, there it is. So I'm just going to slip stitch. There we go. And so there you go. So my corner is now complete. And if I wanted to just finish there, I would just snip my yarn and fasten off. So that, see how that creates that corner there? For me, what I'm going to do is I would like to do at least 1 more round. You might want to do 2 or 3. This blanket actually is still quite small, I guess. If you're going by the standard 32 inches by 36, give or take. Mine is still sitting at about 24. So I could have done more squares. Again, our squares are a little bit smaller. So if you want that typical baby blanket standard sizing, instead of doing 5 squares, maybe I would have done 7. So a 7 by 7 will give you a bit more length and width. All depends on the project that you are working on this for. Now, because mine is still going to hover probably around the 24, 25 inch mark, this will still make a great baby car seat blanket. So a lot of times you don't want that full baby blanket length in the car. So a car seat blanket is just the perfect size, and it allows you to tuck it in a little bit without having so much fabric. So that looks like this is what mine is going to end up being, just simply because of the width. But you know, these really can be worked into any which way you like. So before I continue on and let you loose on finishing off your border, I'm just going to show you how you can move on to another round, which is what I'm going to do. So I will not be snipping my yarn here. I'm actually going to continue the next round. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. So technically I've moved out of the corner. So once you slip stitch, this is the top of this, this stitch here. So this chain 3 counts as 1, but it does not count as having been worked into the corner. Now, what some people might do is they might kind of slip stitch back into the space and start in the corner again, which you can, totally no problemo. I kind of let my stitches move wherever they go. And it just, I don't know, I just kind of like doing that. If I were turning my work back and forth, like let's say if I were turning my work, then I would absolutely do that. And some people will do that, and they'll slip stitch back into that space and do the corner again. I'm just going to keep mine facing the same way. So now I'm just going to continue on doing 1 double crochet into each stitch as I did before. So the rows will now be worked exactly the same. You can now choose to work directly into the stitch if you want, or if you like the effect, this little ridging effect, then you would continue on working into the back loops. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So this is my next stitch here, and I'm going to work into that back loop and just continue doing my usual double crochets. And that's it. And you're pretty much done. So if you are happy with just 1 row of your border, congratulations, you're done. You've reached the end. If you prefer to do another few rounds, then you'll just keep going. And remember, in your corners, 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, and you will be good to go. So for those of you that are finished, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you haven't clicked that subscribe button, make sure you do so. We upload every Wednesday. That way it'll That way you'll always stay up to date on all of our new tutorials and sometimes our stitch session conversations. And if you think you have a friend that may enjoy these or find these helpful, please do share it. I love having you guys come along on my crochet journey as usual. So thank you so much for coming along. I will come back in a few seconds in your time, but in my time, it'll probably take me a little bit to do a few more borders. And I will show you the last kind of final clip of what the final product will look like. So some of you, I'll meet you back here shortly, and some of you, I will bid you adieu and see you in the next video.